Hey guys. Tonight, we time travel way back before highways. Before high-rises. Before your HOA fined you for having the wrong shade of beige curtains. You're deep in the forest now. And the air smells like pine sap and damp soil. Something rustles in the underbrush. But don't worry, it's probably just a curious deer or a raccoon judging your footwear. Before there were blueprints and building codes. Before zoning boards and strip malls. There were humans with nothing but nature and necessity. You step into a clearing and find yourself staring at a structure that looks both humble and brilliant, a dome-shaped wigwam, framed with bent saplings, covered in bark and woven mats. Smoke curls from a hole at the top, and the doorway is low. Deliberately, to keep out the cold. It smells faintly of ash and earth. Welcome to your first crash course in American architecture, the version that didn't make it into those glossy textbooks. And spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't survive this era's winters without a very enthusiastic fire and a lot of deerskin. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always kind of magical seeing listeners from every time zone drifting off together. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle a little closer to the wigwam, crouch through the entrance, and step into warmth. Inside, a low fire crackles. Fur blankets line the curved walls. It's cozy. In a prehistoric, Scandinavian, Airbnb kind of way. Outside, snow is piling up fast. But in here, clever insulation and communal body heat keep things survivable. These dwellings, used by tribes like the Algonquian-speaking peoples in the Northeast, weren't random piles of sticks, they were calculated responses to environment, mobility, and weather patterns. No cement, no screws, no complaints on Reddit. Just engineering that worked, and it wasn't one style fits all. Either. You head further west, through plains that stretch like the world forgot to stop. And now you're inside a teepee. Or rather, you're trying to get in without tripping over the flap and falling straight onto someone's drying buffalo jerky. This structure isn't a dome, it's a cone. Fast to set up, faster to pack, and perfect for the nomadic lifestyle of tribes like the Lakota. In a blizzard, they could break camp in under an hour and be miles away by nightfall. You're still trying to figure out which end of the canvas is the top. Down south, in the desert, the landscape shifts to red dust and sun-scorched stone. The air gets so dry, your nostrils consider unionizing. Here, the architecture hugs the cliffs. You blink up at a multi-story apartment complex carved right into the canyon wall. The ancestral Puebloans were not playing around. These dwellings, often called cliff dwellings, used stone masonry, wooden beams, and adobe plaster, wedged between shadows and survival. You climb a narrow ladder to the second story, your knees complaining, and glance down at a courtyard that's seen 1,000 sunsets. Imagine Home Depot, but everything's handmade, and the customer service is just your cousin, yelling, "Hold the ladder," not far off. The Mississippians were stacking earthen mounds, so massive they made pyramids look insecure. You hike up one, breath, wheezing slightly. Because, well, cardio. And at the top is a wooden structure, likely a temple or the chief's home. The view stretches over an organized grid of homes, maize fields, and ceremonial plazas. Cahokia. They called it. Historians still argue whether this sprawling city was more spiritual center or bureaucratic hub. But either way, it tells you one thing, loud and clear. Cities didn't begin with skyscrapers. They began with people willing to dig by hand. And here's the kicker. None of these structures involved blueprints. Yet they obeyed natural laws so well that many of them stood for centuries. You get the feeling that if a modern house had to face the same storms and seasons, it might shiver itself into splinters. The ingenuity of indigenous design wasn't flashy, it was functional. Passive heating, ventilation through smoke holes, walls that absorbed heat by day and released it at night, architecture that responded instead of dictated. Of course, you do find quirks. Some tribes in the Arctic built semi-subterranean homes called barabaras, essentially earth igloos, where the roof doubled as insulation and snow became your surprisingly efficient ally. Others, like the Seminoles in the swampy South, crafted chickees, raised platforms with thatched roofs to avoid floods, snakes, and the occasional nosy alligator. Modern architecture has smart homes. These were survival, smart homes, and then there's the longhouse. Your next stop, step inside. And it's like a hallway that forgot to end. Used by Iroquois and other northeastern tribes. These long, rectangular homes were designed to fit entire extended families. Dozens of people lived under one roof, with fire pits spaced along the central aisle and sleeping platforms raised along the walls. You squeeze past Auntie in her fur cloak, who gives you a side-eye for tracking in mud, and find yourself at the back, where the smoke is thinner and someone's roasting acorns. These weren't just houses, they were social machines. Family was spatial. Power was shared. The walls carried memories. And yes, a bit of condensation. Historians still debate how much influence these longhouses had on colonial town layouts. But the idea of shared central space and communal living would echo in American housing concepts for centuries. So, you sit in the longhouse for a moment. The fire's soft. People are murmuring around you, and someone hands you a handful of dried berries. Outside, the wind howls, but inside, it's calm, thoughtful, human. You realize this isn't just architecture, it's anthropology. It's philosophy. It's survival with flair. You lean back, warm against the flickering light, and let your thoughts wander. Somewhere out there, someone's drafting a floor plan with 100 features and 0 soul. But here, in the curves of a wigwam or the shade of an adobe wall, it all started with intuition, weather, and the quiet genius of people who didn't need blueprints to build a home. You wake up to the sound of creaking wood, not the gentle groan of a floorboard here or there. No. This place sounds like it's reenacting a horror movie every time someone shifts in their sleep. Welcome to colonial America, where houses are stiff, small, and perpetually cold. And if something isn't leaking, it's probably infested. You shuffle out from under a wool blanket that feels like it was woven by a grudge and take a cautious step across the uneven planks. Everything creaks your feet. The walls, even the chair in the corner that hasn't moved since last Tuesday. You're in a colonial saltbox house, named for its weirdly sloped roof that looks like someone designed half a normal home and gave up on the rest. It's lopsided by design, meant to beat back snow and wind. The front is stately and symmetrical, 2 windows on each side of the central door. The back, though, drops off steeply like a roof slide. You poke your head out the door and immediately regret it. Cold air slaps your face with a level of rudeness that feels personal. Inside, the fireplace dominates everything. It's not just for ambiance or a spot to toast marshmallows. This hearth does all the cooking, heating, and minor life-saving. It smokes a little too enthusiastically, and you wonder how many colonial lungs gave up the ghost to indoor chimney chaos. The beams above your head are exposed, not because it's trendy, but because Finnish work costs extra when you're mostly surviving on cornbread and stringy rabbit. You follow the smoky scent of breakfast, something vaguely porridge adjacent, and find yourself in a kitchen space where everything looks like it wants to give you splinters, pewter mugs, wooden spoons, and iron everything else. You touch a doorknob and get a chill that travels up your spine like your ancestors warning you to moisturize. Colonial architecture wasn't about comfort. It was about not freezing to death. Still, it's oddly cozy, the kind of place where every object has been used 1,000 times and somehow hasn't fully given up. Outside, you step into a lane of wooden homes, most with steep roofs and small-paned windows that resemble polite frowns. These are timber frame structures, a European import, adapted with local materials. Clapboard siding is standard, painted in muted earth tones because flashy colors were either too expensive or deeply suspicious. You pass a meeting house that looks like a barn wearing a bonnet. Everything smells faintly of damp wood, livestock, and the righteous tension of too many Puritans packed into too small a place. Here's your mainstream history fact in early New England settlements. Homes were often built communally. Everyone pitched in, probably with varying levels of enthusiasm and shared materials, tools, and labor. It was part necessity, part community survival. These weren't individualistic dream homes. They were lifeboats. People didn't just build to live, they built not to die. Now for something quirkier. Some of these homes had coffin corners. Yes, you heard that right. Tight staircase meant sharp turns. And since coffins are not famously bendy, builders often designed corners wide enough to accommodate a final exit. Nothing like planning your home around how to get dead relatives out without drywall damage. Historians still argue whether colonial design decisions were more driven by form or fear, were low ceilings meant to retain heat or to discourage fancy ideas. Was the lack of decoration a theological statement or just a shortage of paint? Either way, you're now in a home where the best lighting comes from a window that's just slightly too high to actually see out of. Next, you head south, where the climate lightens and the architecture follows suit. In Virginia and the Carolinas, homes begin to lift off the ground. You step up onto a raised wooden porch, wraparound style, and immediately notice the difference. Breezes cut through like they've got an open invitation. This is an English-style hall and parlor house, often expanded into the familiar southern plantation layout. More space, more symmetry, and eventually, yes, columns. But we're not at the columns yet. For now, it's all about air circulation and not accidentally sleeping next to a swamp snake. You walk through rooms where the ceilings feel a little higher, and the daylight filters in less like a trickle and more like a presence. Windows are larger. Doors are double. And someone has definitely decided to show off their wooden molding. Still, the material is often the same: heart pine, cypress, and other local woods that would withstand humidity and insect interest better than you can handle a mosquito. And the chimneys, oh, they're now on the sides, not the center. Why? Because down here, fireplaces are less about survival and more about cooking. Also, central chimneys radiate heat, which in these summers is the architectural equivalent of asking, "Hey, want to boil yourself indoors?" You sip a cup of something strong and herbal and sit for a moment on the porch. A dog barks in the distance. A wagon wheel creaks by. And a rooster lets you know it's late to something. You imagine building one of these homes timber-framed. Mortise and tenon joints. No, nails. Just wooden pegs and sweat. You imagine doing it while wearing wool in 95-degree weather. And suddenly you understand the appeal of wraparound porches, shade, and airflow. Yes, but mostly the ability to sit very still and recover from being alive. You wander through a garden surrounded by a low fence and spot the outhouse. That's all we'll say about that. Finally, you approach a more elaborate home, still wood-framed, but with 2 chimneys, 5 windows across the top floor, and a central door with decorative trim. It's starting to whisper Georgian. The next wave of architecture ready to tell you that symmetry equals virtue. But you're not quite there yet. For now, you're still wrapped in the slightly uneven, creaking charm of early America, a time when homes were hand-built with stubbornness and a prayer, and sometimes the occasional coffin corner, just in case. You blink against the morning sun as it reflects sharply off window panes lined up with geometric precision. Welcome to the age of Georgian architecture, where everything finally looks like it's been measured with a ruler, instead of just guessed. You stand before a brick house so symmetrical it feels like it might quietly judge you if you stand slightly off-center. 5 windows above, 5 below. Central door. Steep gable roof order. Balance. And absolutely zero room for your quirky self-expression. You approach the front steps, which are narrow and brick-lined, and knock on a paneled wooden door framed by classical pilasters. Someone answers. They're wearing a powdered wig and looking mildly unimpressed. You're ushered in, and immediately the interior matches the exterior neat. Rectangular rooms laid out around a central hallway. This is a home built to impress, not to hug. It's cooler inside temperature-wise, and emotionally, the fireplace is ornate. With a carved mantel featuring mythological motifs, a bust of someone important, maybe George II. Maybe someone's uncle watches you, like a disapproving history teacher. Georgian style isn't trying to charm you, it's trying to show off its education. These buildings were the colonial elite's way of saying, we may be across the ocean, but we're not architectural peasants. The brick is laid in Flemish bond, a technique as complicated as it sounds. Alternating stretchers and headers for strength and aesthetics. You run your hand along the interior paneling. It's real wood, expensive wood, no MDF here. Just trees that had long, fulfilling lives before becoming wall decorations. Mainstream historical fact time. Georgian architecture dominated the American colonies from roughly 1700 to the Revolutionary War. Inspired by the Renaissance and classical traditions, it was a direct nod to the architectural ideals of balance, proportion, and civility, especially popular among the merchant and planter classes. It was imported through pattern books and copied designs, and a rather smug belief in the superiority of ancient Rome. And yet, quirky alert, early American builders sometimes messed up their symmetry. Peek behind some of these houses, and you'll find chimneys that aren't quite centered, or staircases that twist a little too abruptly. That's because many of these homes were expanded in stages. Georgian ideals met colonial reality, and suddenly, a two-room cottage got an extra wing when someone's second cousin moved in indefinitely. You've got the illusion of order, even if the plumbing, when it eventually arrived, disagreed. Historians still argue whether Georgian homes in America were more about social climbing or genuine cultural reverence. Was it love for Palladian architecture, or just wanting to keep up with the neighbors in powdered wigs? Either way, you're now standing in the drawing room of someone who once hosted a tea party with scandalous amounts of nutmeg. You're led into the dining room, where symmetry reigns. Two windows flank a fireplace. A massive mahogany table stretches across the center. You're offered a seat, probably out of politeness, and gently warned not to scratch the finish. The walls are painted a tasteful shade of sage green or soft blue colors, made from pigments so expensive they probably involved ground-up bugs or imported minerals. You sip tea that's just bitter enough to taste like taxation. Now, step outside. Your shoes click against a clean brick path lined with boxwoods trimmed to military precision. In the distance, another Georgian house mirrors this one. This is Williamsburg. Maybe. Or Philadelphia. You walk past orderly streets, with orderly houses filled with orderly lives, or at least the appearance thereof. You can practically hear the revolutionary fervor brewing behind those perfect window shutters. And here's where things get spicy. You turn a corner and find a Georgian church, instantly recognizable by its square steeple, white trim, and that telltale fan light above the door. These structures weren't just houses, they shaped civic buildings, town halls, and universities. Harvard's Georgian campus, basically Hogwarts, with fewer cloaks and more calculus. American architecture was getting its first real identity through imitation. But don't get too cozy. Some of these Georgian homes had quirky additions that break the facade of order. Secret staircases, cabinets built into chimneys, and the occasional mouse hole that got its own folklore. Builders might have followed the pattern books, but they were also human, and humans love shortcuts. You wander through a port city, perhaps Boston or Charleston, and spot variations of the style row houses packed shoulder to shoulder, sometimes with third-floor dormers peeking like curious eyebrows. You press against a brick wall, still blackened from candle soot, and think about how many generations have passed through that same narrow hallway. Under those same wooden beams, the elegance of Georgian architecture becomes more than visual. It becomes ritual. The way chairs are placed equidistant from the fireplace, the balance of painting and portrait on every wall, the expectation that even the house itself should mind its manners. Yet, despite the formal look, these homes weren't entirely cold. Families gathered here, Children played marbles in the halls. Aunts gossiped while shucking corn. The formality softened at the edges. Especially in the colonies, where practicality had a way of sneaking in through the back door. You peek into a cramped servant's quarter tucked behind the main house. It's plainer. Yes, but not empty. Tools lean in corners. Drying herbs hang from the rafters. And someone has carved initials into the windowsill. Architecture isn't just marble and molding. It's the lived-in corners, the scuffed floors, the cracked plaster that speaks louder than any architectural style guide. As the day wanes, the sun hits the brick walls just right, making everything glow, a warm amber. You sit on a stone stoop, hands warming against the last heat of the day, and let the order and quiet soak in. A time when architecture wore powdered wigs and tried very hard to pretend everything was under control, even when revolution was bubbling just under the surface. You're back on the stoop, watching the shadows lengthen over symmetrical windows and polite little hedges. When something starts to shift, the clean Georgian lines are still there, but they're getting bolder. Leaner, like the buildings just drank a double espresso and remembered they were independent now. Welcome to the federal style, where America gets its architectural swagger on. You walk up to a new house, still red brick. Still buttoned up, but something's changed. The columns flanking the front door are slimmer now. Elegant, instead of stocky. The windows are taller, like they've been stretched by ambition. There's a fanlight arch above the door, more decorative than practical, but deeply confident. You step through that door and into a hallway where everything whispers refinement. You've officially entered the architectural equivalent of a freshly signed constitution. Federal-style homes are a flex. You can feel it in the plaster swirls on the ceiling, the thin wooden moldings framing the rooms like a signature. These houses say, "We've broken free from the king. And now, we're importing Roman democracy and Greek virtue instead." You know, for vibes. Inside, the furniture is lighter, both in look and actual weight. No more monstrous chairs that double as medieval traps. Now, chairs have spindly legs and curved backs. You sit in one and feel 18% more important. Over in the parlor, there's probably a mirror mounted too high to be practical, and a plaster medallion on the ceiling framing a chandelier that never quite stops swaying. Mainstream fact time. The federal style emerged just after the Revolutionary War, around 1780, and dominated through the 1830s. It was heavily influenced by the work of British architect Robert Adam, but filtered through a very American lens. Think neoclassical, but with fewer scrolls and more restraint. It showed up in townhouses, government buildings, and ambitious homes for the new republic's rising class. If Georgian architecture was your stern grandfather, federal is your ambitious older cousin who just graduated from law school. And here comes the quirky bit. Sometimes these buildings had sideways staircases winding up in an unexpected corner of the house like an afterthought. Why? Because builders had to work around tight urban plots, especially in cities like Baltimore and Boston. These narrow homes squeezed grandeur into slivers. You'd walk into a 3-room wide house and find 4 fireplaces and a ceiling medallion the size of a wagon wheel. Historians still argue whether federal homes were truly American innovations or just gentler copies of European styles. Was this boldness or politeness, an evolution or an apology? Either way, you can't deny these buildings had a quiet confidence. They weren't trying to look rich. They were trying to look enlightened. You stroll through a city street in Philadelphia. Federal facades line both sides' flat fronts. Iron railings. Fan lights winking in the sunlight. A brass door knocker shaped like a pineapple greets you at the next door. You knock. No answer. Probably out reading the Federalist papers over brunch. The interior of the next house feels almost too composed. Thin fireplaces. Built-in bookcases. Windows so large you can nearly see into next week. There's probably a harpsichord in the corner. Or at least a stern portrait of someone wearing too much cravat. You pass through a narrow dining room. The walls painted in an alarmingly fashionable shade of peacock blue. Who knew democracy came in such bold colors? And here's where things get amusing. You climb to the top floor, probably up a staircase, so narrow it feels like a dare, and discover the garret. That's right, the servants' quarters. Storage. Maybe a makeshift bedroom. It's got sloped ceilings and low beams, and about 3 inches of standing room if you're under 5'7". But someone lived here. Possibly multiple someones. The house may look symmetrical, but its story has layers like a cake with secrets. Back on the main floor, you run your hand along a fireplace mantel carved with dental molding a series of tooth-like squares that, yes, looks like someone gave the wall a set of molars. Why? Because it looked dignified. And dignity was very in. Ava doorknobs got fancy. Brass. Porcelain. Some shaped like eagles. Others like urns. Every detail mattered. Even if it was just you and your reflection in the parlor mirror. Outside, the street buzzes with the sound of carriages and gossip. You spot a federal-style post office. Yes, the mail is late. But the pediment above the doorway is on time. These buildings weren't just homes, they were expressions of ideology. Smooth columns, clean lines, and endless references to ancient Rome. All carefully curated to say, we are a republic now. Thank you very much. And we will have dignified columns. The weather's warming up. You head down south, to places like Savannah and Charleston, where the federal style blends with local materials and climate realities. You find porticos supported by slender pillars, decorative ironwork, wrapping balconies like corsets, and fanlights with enough flair to double as art. The interiors stay cool in the heat. Thanks to high ceilings and strategic cross-ventilation, you, on the other hand, are still regretting your choice of socks. You wander into a ballroom with wide plank floors and a ceiling so high it echoes your steps. The plaster work here is ornate, like icing on a wedding cake. And you imagine parties filled with swirling gowns and carefully rehearsed pleasantries. The walls don't talk, but they do hum with memory. Before you leave, you take a final look at the front door. Federal architecture always had a thing for entrances. It wanted you to know, right from the threshold, that this house had ideals. You run your hand over the slender columns and semicircular fanlight, and for a second, you almost believe this building really is a republic in miniature. And then a carriage wheel splashes mud on your shoes, and you're reminded dignity is relative. You're still brushing mud off your shoes when you turn the corner and feel the full force of a new obsession sweeping across the freshly formed United States Greece. Not literally, you haven't teleported, but symbolically, spiritually, and architecturally, America has developed a serious crush on ancient Athens. Welcome to the Greek Revival period. where every courthouse, bank, and overly ambitious farmhouse is suddenly pretending to be a temple. You approach one such building. And yes, it has columns. Tall, white, fluted ones with dramatic capitals that are either Doric chunky and no nonsense, Ionic, a little swirlier, or Corinthian, so extra they might as well wear a feather boa. Above those columns, a triangular pediment, like someone sliced a giant wedge of cheese and slapped it on top. It's formal, it's rigid, and it's got drama. You half expect Socrates to show up and ask how your crops are doing. Greek revival is nothing if not bold. This architectural wave hit in the early 1800s and didn't let go until the Civil War, painting the nation with a facade of whitewashed democracy. You step through a door that feels more ceremonial than functional, framed by pilasters, topped with a transom window, maybe even flanked by sidelights that scream, "Look how symmetrical I am." Inside, the ceilings are tall because height equals importance, obviously, and the floors are either bare wood or covered with rugs that know they're just decorative placeholders for more important ideas, like liberty and architectural flexing. You're in a parlor that feels like it could lecture you about civic duty. The fireplace is centered with intimidating precision, the furniture arranged in carefully curated rows, and a portrait of George Washington peers down with a mixture of approval and mild constipation. Mainstream historical fact: Greek revival flourished between the 1820s and 1850s, driven by a romanticized connection between ancient Greek democracy and the American Republic. Architects and their clients saw Athens as the ideological ancestor of the United States. So, of course, why not make everything look like it belongs on the Acropolis? You wander into a library, or maybe it's a courtroom, and the same style continues. Smooth walls, tall windows, symmetrical plans. You glance upward and notice a plaster medallion shaped like a laurel wreath. Bookshelves line the walls, filled with dusty tomes and the scent of self-importance. This isn't a cozy place for reading. It's a room designed to make you feel like a better person just for walking in. And now, for something quirky. Some rural Greek revival homes were built entirely out of wood, yet painted white to imitate marble. Faux marble. You run your fingers across the fluted column beside the porch and realize it's pine, not stone. So yes, America was LARPing as ancient Greece, but with a woodshop budget. Historians still argue whether this style represented genuine democratic aspiration or just a convenient way to make houses look expensive. Did people want their homes to symbolize philosophy and order, or did they just really like how temple columns made the neighbors jealous? Regardless, Greek revival exploded across the country. From grand plantation houses in the South to tiny clapboard churches in New England, everyone was getting in on the toga party. You move west now, yes. The country's expanding. And so is the architecture. You pass through towns along the frontier where Greek revival still rears its columned head. But here, the columns are simpler, the pediments a bit more lopsided. These homes want to be temples, but also need to survive thunderstorms, toddlers, and bears. You enter one such house, where the dining room table doubles as a desk, and the ceiling leaks just enough to keep you humble. The architecture still insists on symmetry, though 2 rooms on each side of a central hallway, each window carefully placed like it's posing for a daguerreotype. You peek out one and see open prairie stretching to the horizon. This is Greek Revival. Frontier Edition. Democracy with dirt floors. Your next stop is a church. Its front facade is nearly identical to a temple. 6 white columns. Wide stone steps. Pediment above. Inside, the pews stretch in tidy rows, and natural light floods in from tall windows shaped like they're judging your posture. These churches were meant to feel serious. No Gothic arches or stained glass whimsy here, just clean lines, white paint, and moral clarity you could bounce a coin off of. And yet, despite all the structure and formality, Greek Revival had its moments of personality. Front doors were often painted bold colors, blues, reds, even yellows. Windows sometimes had delicate ironwork. And porches, oh, the porches broad, welcoming, sometimes wrapping all the way around. A democratic temple with a side of sweet tea as you walk through another town square. This one somewhere in Ohio. You spot a Greek Revival bank, a courthouse, and a row of homes that could double as movie sets. You realize this style wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about narrative. America was still inventing itself. And what better costume to wear than the architectural robes of the philosophers? You pause at a rural schoolhouse with telltale Greek features, front gable, square shape, clapboard siding. It's small, modest, but unmistakably Revival. You sit inside on a wooden bench, dust dancing in the sunbeams, and imagine children learning under a roof modeled after ancient ideals. The teacher's chalk squeaks. The fire pops in its iron stove. And somewhere outside, a rooster crows, like it's part of the faculty. The sun starts to dip. You pass one last Greek Revival mansion, grand, white, imposing, maybe even a little smug. The columns catch the last golden rays like they've been waiting all day for a spotlight. You lean against one, feel its grain beneath the paint, and think, yes, it's wood, but it's also aspiration, theatricality, and a very specific kind of national daydream. You leave the temple-like columns behind, boots crunching on gravel as the landscape shifts again. The air gets warmer, heavier, more humid. Spanish moss hangs from trees like nature's attempt at lace curtains. And ahead there, it is a massive wraparound porch. White wooden balusters, and shutters that look like they were meant more for style than for weather. You've arrived at the antebellum South, where the architecture is big, beautiful, and carrying more than a little historical baggage. The plantation house before you gleams in the sun, its Greek Revival face unmistakable. But behind the grand portico, the architectural DNA branches out. Bits of federal, colonial, and Creole swirl together like they're at a cotillion, and no one wants to step on each other's toes. You climb the steps and pause under the shade of the veranda. Ceiling fans whir lazily above you. Well, in your imagination. Anyway, and the sweet tea practically manifests in your hand. Inside, everything seems designed to stretch out time. Ceilings so high they could echo your yawn. Windows tall and slender to catch the slightest breeze. You wander into the main hall and feel your footsteps absorbed by thick rugs and polished wood floors. A wide staircase curves upward like it knows it's supposed to be admired. Not rushed. Mainstream historical fact, plantation architecture in the American South was often a hybrid of styles: Greek revival for its grandeur, Georgian for its order, and local adaptations for the intense heat. These homes were symbols of wealth and power, built by enslaved laborers whose names rarely appear in the storybooks, but whose hands shaped every brick, every beam. The walls here are thick, often made from brick or tabby concrete, a regional mixture of lime, water, and oyster shells. You touch one, cool and chalky, and feel the centuries still clinging to it. The furniture is heavy, ornate, draped in fabric that's fighting a losing battle with mildew. And every room has at least one fainting couch. You're not sure whether it's for the heat or the drama. But either way, you suddenly want to lie down and sigh about your imaginary inheritance. And here comes your quirky tidbit. Some southern mansions had false doors installed just to preserve the symmetry of their facades. Doors that led nowhere. Literal architectural lies. You stare at one now, wondering if it opens to a tiny closet or just a wall, and decide not to risk embarrassment. Historians still argue whether plantation architecture should be appreciated aesthetically, condemned politically, or somehow both. Can you admire the woodwork and still acknowledge the system that funded it? It's a house built on contradiction, beauty, and brutality. Holding hands under a chandelier, you step into the back wing, where things are plainer, utilitarian. These were the working spaces: pantries, storage rooms, sometimes detached kitchens, designed to keep the main house cooler and the smells contained. You wander through a breezeway into a courtyard lined with outbuildings, servant quarters. Maybe, or more likely, quarters for enslaved people. Here, the brickwork is rougher, the floors, hard-packed dirt, the windows, barely slits. It's cuter here, and heavier. The architecture doesn't shout anymore, it whispers. You sit for a moment on a low stone step and think about how many lives moved through this space. How many sunrises were seen from that doorway? How many names went unrecorded? Then, just as the stillness settles, you hear it, the distant rhythm of hooves. You stand, turn, and head toward the front drive. Another grand home rises beyond the trees. This one with a French Creole influence, less symmetrical, more fluid. The roof flares out at the edges like it's trying to take flight. The gallery, a wide, open-air porch, is supported by delicate iron columns, their shapes curling like wrought iron vines. You step up and find that inside. Everything is slightly off-kilter compared to what you've seen before. The rooms are connected enfilade style, one after another. No central hallway. The walls are painted in soft pastels, and the ceilings are painted sky blue, a tradition carried over from West Africa and the Caribbean, meant to keep Haint's restless spirits away. Quirky, sure, but also deeply rooted in cultural superstition and centuries of storytelling. The breeze moves through the house like it pays rent. Louvered shutters let in just enough light to feel romantic but not sweaty. You sit on a carved wooden settee and feel like you're waiting for someone to recite poetry or duel for your honor. But instead, you get a mosquito, because history doesn't care about your aesthetic. You cross back into Anglo territory. Louisiana turns into Mississippi, into Alabama, and the houses grow even taller, even more symmetrical, as if they're trying to one-up each other. three-story monstrosities with belvederes on top, cupolas for ventilation, even widows' walks in areas nowhere near the sea. It's a fever dream of columns and cornices and corner parlors. America was showing off, and in many ways, still is, but peek past the grandeur, and you'll see practical touches, high ceilings for heat, central hallways for air movement, rooms positioned to catch the cross breeze. This wasn't just luxury, it was adaptation. The architecture knew the climate, even if the people sometimes pretended they didn't have to sweat. You pass a plantation chapel, a small white structure with a triangular pediment and modest steeple. Inside, the pews are narrow, the windows plain. Outside, the graveyard tells more stories than the family Bible. You trace the name on a crumbling headstone and wonder how many lives are still held in the mortar of this place. As the evening heat thickens, you walk one last loop around a plantation home, its columns glowing pink in the setting sun. It's beautiful. Yes, but complicated. A house can be two things at once, majestic and mournful. You run your fingers along a railing polished by 100 years of hands and step down into the long, echoing twilight of history. The sun's dipping lower now, and with it, the trees thicken. You follow a winding path away from the wide verandas and whispering magnolias until something pokes out of the forest tall, narrow, and unmistakably dramatic. You've arrived in the age of Gothic revival, where architecture decided that what homes really needed were pointed arches, gables so sharp they could slice bread, and windows shaped like they're about to confess something. The house before you looks more like a church than a residence. Steeply pitched roof check, finials and decorative trim that resemble lace made from wood check. A general feeling that a thunderstorm is always about to start. Double check. You take a few cautious steps forward, half expecting a raven to caw ominously from the eaves. You knock on the heavy wooden door, arched. Of course, and it creaks open with perfect haunted house timing. Inside, the light is dim, filtered through stained glass in colors that don't entirely match. The walls are dark paneled, the furniture Victorian and spindly, as if designed by someone who feared comfort was morally suspect. A grandfather clock ticks loudly in the hallway, and you suddenly feel underdressed. Mainstream historical fact: Gothic revival architecture gained popularity in the United States in the mid-1800s. Largely thanks to architects like Alexander Jackson Davis and tastemakers like Andrew Jackson Downing. Inspired by medieval cathedrals and castles, it was meant to evoke romanticism, spirituality, and a return to craftsmanship. And boy, did it commit. You pass under an interior arch that frames a hallway lined with pointed doors and peculiar niches. There's likely a morning room somewhere. Yes, a whole room dedicated to grieving, often with black curtains and portraits of people looking deeply disappointed. This wasn't just a house, it was a moral statement, or a theatrical production. Either way, there are no beanbags here. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Gothic revival homes included fake ruins in their gardens, deliberately crumbling towers or arches, meant to invoke nostalgia for a medieval past that Americans had never actually lived through. Imagine planting a fake broken wall next to your geraniums and calling it poetic. You peer out the back window and yep, there's something ruin-shaped next to the birdbath. Historians still argue whether the Gothic revival's spiritual tone came from genuine religious fervor or just a Victorian love of drama. Was it meant to elevate the soul, or just sell more copies of The Mysteries of Udolpho? Either way, the vibe is clear. This is not a home for casual loafing. You sit in a high-backed chair and immediately feel judged by the wallpaper. You step outside again. The porch wrapped with ornate verge boards, those gingerbread-looking wooden flourishes that line the gables. They look delicate but are often surprisingly sturdy. Like the Victorian psyche. There's even a turret. Because why not? Every home needs a tower where you can pretend to be waiting for either a proposal or a séance. Heading down the drive, you notice something interesting. The house sits not in a bustling city but in a carefully chosen natural setting by a brook, under towering oaks, near a crumbling stone fence. Gothic revival loved nature, but only the curated, slightly melancholy kind. Your average squirrel still wasn't invited. You pass a small Gothic-style church, its steeple soaring, its stained glass radiating a soft glow. Even cemeteries took on the style, cemetery architecture being a real thing, with family crypts shaped like mini cathedrals. Apparently, even your final address deserved an architectural flourish. Then, just as you start getting used to the drama, the tone shifts again. The next house you approach feels lighter. Tuileries. Still Victorian, but with a painter's palette instead of a monk's palette. Welcome to High Victorian Gothic, or as it sometimes lovingly goes by, Gothic that swallowed a candy shop. The trim is now painted in 3, sometimes 4, sometimes 7 different colors. Turrets become whimsier, porches wider, decorative spindles, brackets, and friezes decorate every square inch. It's as if someone dared the architect to use every pattern in the catalog. You stand back and squint at a house that looks like a haunted dollhouse dressed for Mardi Gras. It's wonderful. It's ridiculous. It's trying very hard. And you kind of love it. Inside, the floors creak in the right way, and the parlor wallpaper features vines, cherubs, and maybe a small dragon. You're no longer in a spiritual statement. You're in a curated chaos of patterns, textures, and tassels. But despite the frills, these homes were still homes. Children did their homework under pointed windows. People sneezed on those elaborate drapes. And in the kitchen plain, functional, and slightly smoky, someone was probably yelling about overboiled cabbage. All the Gothic arches in the world can't change the fact that life, even in a turret, is still just life. And life was changing fast. The railroad was expanding. Towns were growing. A middle class was rising with enough cash to buy land and enough taste or ambition to fill it with trim-heavy, architecturally opinionated houses. Magazines printed house plans. Pattern books exploded. You could build your dream home, complete with lancet windows and a useless tower, for a modest fee and a willingness to deal with sawdust for the next 4 months, as twilight descends. The Gothic revival homes begin to glow. Not warmly, more like an eldritch pulse, but you find it comforting. You walk the neighborhood slowly, past iron fences shaped like thorns, under pointed gables that stretch into the darkening sky. You remember how Georgian homes whispered about order, and Greek ones flexed with ideals. But these homes feel like they're telling you a story. One that's part fairy tale, part fever dream, and entirely built to be remembered. You pause at the gate of one final house. A widow's walk perches on the roof, wrapped in railing, empty under the moon. You wonder who once stood there, waiting, watching, or maybe just enjoying the view of an architectural era that loved drama with its morning tea. You wake to the sight of a house that looks like it dressed up for its own birthday party. Frilly trim, vibrant paint, towers that go nowhere, and windows of every conceivable shape. Welcome to the Victorian era's high point, the Queen Anne style. It's not named after the real Queen Anne. Mind you, just hijacked her name for something far louder. You take a few cautious steps forward, half expecting the porch to hand you a cupcake. The house looms with enthusiasm. Asymmetrical roof lines, patterned shingles, turned woodwork on every corner. It's like a gingerbread house. Had a very dramatic adolescence. You step up to the porch and run your hand along a spindle balustrade, so intricate it could double as lacework. There's a turret overhead. And you wonder what, exactly, is supposed to go in a turret. Probably regrets and antique dolls. Mainstream historical fact: Queen Anne architecture was all the rage from the 1880s through the turn of the century. A subset of the broader Victorian style. Fueled by industrial advances in mass production, homes could suddenly be decked out in all kinds of decorative excess for cheap. You didn't need a master carver. You needed a catalog and a train ticket. And, oh, the catalogs. Pattern books exploded during this time. Sears, Roebuck & Co. even offered entire houses by mail-order pre-cut lumber. Instructions. And all. Some Queen Anne homes, believe it or not, were assembled like flat-pack furniture. Except, instead of arguing over an Allen wrench, you were lifting full-size gables into place and trying not to drop a turret on your foot. You step inside and immediately get sensory overload. The walls are papered, flocked, velvet, floral, or possibly an entire forest scene. The ceiling has medallions. The light fixtures are gas-electric hybrids. And there are more patterns here than in a quilting bee on espresso. A stained glass window filters sunlight into soft sherbet hues. And you pause to enjoy the moment before realizing your chair has at least 6 types of tassels on it. Historians still argue whether Queen Anne homes were artistic statements or just architectural noise. Was this style a rebellion against the industrial age's sameness or its inevitable extension? Cloaked in decoration. Either way, it was a lot, and people loved it. You head through a parlor, then a sitting room, then maybe a drawing room, or is this a music room? It's honestly unclear. Victorian houses specialized in specialized spaces. Bedrooms were for sleeping, parlors for guests, studies for brooding. There was a room for everything, including rooms for nothing. You find one now small, octagonal, with a single chair and no explanation. It's probably haunted. Or it's where someone read poetry and drank lukewarm sherry. Quirky side note: some Queen Anne homes had something called a witch's window, a window tilted diagonally, usually tucked between roof lines. The idea was that witches couldn't fly their brooms through a slanted opening. You peer at one now and decide it's either superstition or the result of someone deeply overestimating a witch's spatial awareness. Upstairs. The layout turns into a full-on maze. You pass through a narrow hallway, duck under an unexpected beam, and emerge in a bedroom with a fireplace too small to roast even a marshmallow. Each room feels like it belongs to a different house entirely. You open a closet and find a built-in vanity with tiny drawers labeled for gloves, hairpins, and secrets. In the servant's staircase hidden behind a hinged panel, you find even tighter spaces. Queen Anne homes may have looked massive, but much of their square footage was chopped up into pockets. Privacy was prized. Doors everywhere. You pause to count 12 in a single hallway. You open one and find another staircase. Up you go. The attic, naturally, is the best part. Vaulted ceilings, exposed beams, and a round window that looks like it belongs in a submarine. You imagine a teenager up here in 1895, writing moody letters by gaslight and composing sonnets no one ever read. The floorboards creak with purpose. Even the dust feels historically accurate. Downstairs again. You step out into the backyard. There's likely a carriage house nearby, a few pieces of cast iron furniture, and a garden edged in overly decorative fencing. Everything here insists on having an opinion. Even the path to the side gate curves dramatically, like it has secrets to keep. You walk down a street of Queen Anne's now, each house trying to outdo its neighbor. One has a 3-story tower with a weather vane shaped like a lion. Another has scalloped shingles that form a fish scale pattern, which is somehow both whimsical and slightly unsettling. Mailboxes are cast in iron, and even the address numbers are in curly fonts that take a second to decipher. And here's a fun fact. Many Queen Anne houses were painted in bright painted lady schemes: turquoise, burgundy, gold, pea green. Why? Because they could. The invention of synthetic pigments and factory-mixed paint opened up a literal rainbow, and homeowners were not shy about using it. You pass a salmon-pink house with emerald green trim and find yourself oddly charmed. As night falls, the houses begin to glow from within. Light filters through colored glass, casting ruby and sapphire patterns on their gingerbread trim. From a distance, they look like oversized music boxes. From up close, like architectural daydreams that woke up and never went back to sleep. You pause at the end of the street and look back. Each home, a testament to a moment in time when more was more, and less was considered a failure of imagination. Sure, they creak. Sure, the layouts are confusing, but they were built in an age that believed deeply in detail. You lean against an ornate fence post, let your fingers trace the curling metal, and allow yourself a smile. It's a lot, but it's good. You trade in gingerbread trim and weather vanes for something tighter, closer, grimmer. You step off a cobbled street and into a cramped brick building where the windows are so small, you're not sure whether they're supposed to provide light or just a vague sense of outside. Welcome to the tenement, America's architectural response to immigration, industrialization, and the relentless need to cram as many lives as possible into a shoebox without handles. The hallway greets you with the aroma of boiled cabbage, coil smoke, and at least one mystery smell you elect not to identify. You ascend a narrow staircase, slick with age and the ghosts of 1,000 muddy boots. It leans just slightly, like it's tired of supporting hopes and bad plumbing. Inside the apartment, if we're feeling generous with that word, you find a front room, maybe 12 feet across, where 4 people are already trying to eat, sleep, and not step on each other's dreams. Mainstream historical fact. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, tenements were the dominant form of housing for working-class families in cities like New York, Chicago, and Boston. Immigrants poured into the country, and developers responded by slicing buildings into the barest essentials: 3 rooms, no hallway, 1 shared bathroom per floor if you were lucky. The 1901 New York Tenement House Act finally mandated windows, fire escapes, and other luxuries. But by then, millions had already lived in the dark. You duck into the kitchen, which doubles as a bedroom, dining room, and sometimes a bathing spot provided you don't mind using a pot and a curtain. You try to sit, but the only chair is stacked with blankets, and someone's baby is asleep in a wooden drawer. The wallpaper peels like it's trying to flee, and the ceiling sports a suspicious brown patch that may or may not blink when you're not looking. Quirky fact. For you, some tenement windows opened into air shafts that were only a few feet wide and shared between buildings. The view, your neighbor's identical window, 4 feet away. If you were quiet, you could hear their arguments, lullabies, and Tuesday soup recipes. If you were nosy, you could smell all of it too. Historians still argue whether tenements represented opportunity or oppression. Were they stepping stones to a better life, or traps that fed generations into poverty? The truth, like the plumbing, was murky. Families came, hoping. Builders profited shamelessly. Cities swelled, and thousands of lives unfolded behind the same cracked windows. You walk out into a shared corridor, barely wide enough to exhale in. Children run past, playing with tin cans and string. Somewhere, someone's practicing violin with more enthusiasm than skill. A woman with rolled-up sleeves stirs a pot that smells like comfort. And you realize it's not hopeless in here, just hard. You descend the stairs again, this time out the back. The courtyard, if it can be called, that is a rectangle of packed dirt, ringed by rusted fire escapes and dripping laundry lines. There's 1 water pump, 2 benches, and roughly 14 cats of questionable ownership. You stand for a moment and just breathe. It's noisy. It's crowded. It's alive. From here, you move down the block to a slightly nicer tenement, a dumbbell plan, with indented air shafts meant to comply with new regulations. These buildings still pack families in like sardines, but now, with government-approved gaps for ventilation. You climb another narrow stair and reach a landing where light actually filters in from a shaft. It's weak light, but still, progress. Inside, the layout is more organized. 3 rooms in a row, a parlor, a middle room, and a kitchen. Still cramped, still noisy. But now you can see your hand in front of your face without lighting a gas lamp. Someone singing in the stairwell, a lullaby in Polish or Yiddish or Italian. Soft and full of tired love. You lean against the doorframe and let the voices of 100 languages wash over you. A few blocks away, a settlement house offers English lessons, sewing classes, and medical care. These were the community's lifelines, architecture meeting social work halfway. You walk past a stoop where teenagers in flat caps are arguing about baseball in 3 different dialects. Someone's grandmother is yelling at pigeons. Someone's father is fixing shoes by gaslight. You begin to feel the tenement not just as a place, but as an organism, a brick-and-mortar ecosystem of survival. But don't be fooled. The fire hazards are real. The bathrooms overflow. The walls are so thin you could sneeze into your neighbor's soup. And yet, people live. They make it work. They make it home. Because in the end, it's shelter. It's location. It's a beginning. You climb to the roof, everyone does eventually. It's the only open sky most tenement dwellers see. Here, the city breathes. Rooftop gardens small. Scrappy pop up next to laundry lines and pigeon coops. Someone's playing harmonica. Someone else is pretending to read a newspaper, but mostly just enjoying the sun. You sit on the ledge, feet dangling, and take in the jagged geometry of tenements, packed shoulder to shoulder. It's beautiful. In a way, not because the buildings are grand, but because they're honest. They don't pretend to be temples or manors. They're shelters stacked high, patched together by hopes and drywall and noisy stairwells. They're where America got loud, got crowded, got real. As night settles in, lights flicker behind mismatched curtains. You watch a shadow pull a blanket tight, a figure right in the flickering glow of a coal stove, a girl plucking strings from memory. The building doesn't sleep, it hums. You climb down from the tenement rooftop with soot on your sleeves and ambition in your step, because while the crowded blocks behind you thrum with survival, what rises ahead is something else, entirely, an audacious leap skyward. You round a corner, and suddenly your neck cranes back involuntarily. There it is. A skyscraper. Steel bones. Glass skin. And the architectural equivalent of shouting, "Look what I can do at the heavens." The street below buzzes with early 20th century ambition trolley bells, newspaper boys, and the click-clack of dress shoes on pavement. But your eyes stay fixed on the sky-piercing marvel above a structure that looks both impossibly heavy and impossibly light. You step into the lobby of one such building, where polished brass, marble floors, and soaring arches conspire to make you feel like a minor god. You ride a creaky elevator, newfangled and slightly terrifying, up, and still further up, mainstream historical fact. The birth of the skyscraper happened in the late 19th century. Thanks to the magic combo of steel frame construction and the safety elevator, thank you, Mr. Otis. Chicago and New York became the proving grounds, where architects like Louis Sullivan and Daniel Burnham laid the groundwork literally for the vertical cities we know today. From up here, say, the 20th floor, you can see across a sea of rooftops, water towers, and smokestacks. The city spreads like spilled ink. The floor below your feet, not heavy stone walls, it's suspended steel. Strong as anything but light enough to soar. And that's the trick. The invention of the steel skeleton meant buildings no longer needed load-bearing walls. You could go up, way up, and still have room for windows, light, air, and elevators filled with people who haven't quite figured out small talk. You enter an office, or perhaps a bank, and it's all dark wood paneling, frosted glass, and ceiling fans that sound like they're whispering secrets. Light streams in through windows that, for the first time in American architecture, don't have to be stingy slits. Instead, whole walls of windows offer views that make you feel important, even if you're just sharpening pencils for a living. Quirky architectural tidbit. Early skyscrapers often featured decorative cornices, so elaborate they required entire teams of sculptors to install. Gargoyles, eagles, floral motifs, and even terracotta lions were wedged between 18th and 19th floors just for fun. You peer out the window now and see a griffin gazing majestically at an alley full of trash cans. Dignity is where you place it. Historians still argue whether skyscrapers democratized architecture by maximizing space or simply symbolized the ambitions of the capitalist elite. Did they make cities more livable or just more vertical? Either way, you can't deny their presence. A skyline is a nation's ambition, frozen in glass and rivets, back on street level. You pass under the shadow of the Flatiron Building, an early marvel that looks like a slice of pie someone turned into an office. Its wedge-shaped footprint, dictated by Broadway and Fifth Avenue's stubborn intersection, became one of the most iconic silhouettes in the world. You press your hand to its limestone facade and feel the thrum of innovation. Around the corner, another skyscraper rises taller, sleeker, newer. This one wears its Art Deco roots proudly. Polished metal trim, stepped-back tier, and zigzag patterns race up the sides like lightning bolts in stone. You're looking at the Chrysler Building now. And if architecture could wink, this one just did. You enter its lobby, and it's like walking into a jazz riff, glinting marble, muraled ceilings, elevator doors engraved with sunbursts. The 1930s were wild, and their buildings knew how to show it. Every angle, every shine, every stepped layer of the facade is a visual drumroll. Even the radiator caps are styled like hood ornaments. And why not? The future had arrived. And it brought chrome. Upstairs, you stand at the window and watch the city change. Tenements still huddle down below. Churches nestle between the towers like shy neighbors. And construction sites buzz like anthills. There's noise and grime and momentum. You notice now how these skyscrapers don't just rise. They're shaped step-backs, mandated by the 1916 zoning resolution, keep light reaching the street. So buildings tear backward like wedding cakes or ziggurats, all to let a little sunshine touch the sidewalk. The law was practical, but the result, stunning. You walk past workers in hard hats pouring concrete, canes lifting beams, and someone yelling in Italian over a lunch pail. This city wasn't built by blueprints alone. It was forged in sweat and steel and infinite cups of terrible coffee. You hear a rivet gun echo off the buildings like applause. You move now to a building just completed clean lines. Sleek surface. No ornamentation to be found. It's the international style. Arriving from Europe with a passport stamped Bauhaus. The idea form follows function. Decoration is sin. Glass, steel, and simplicity take center stage. You touch the cool metal doorframe, and it says no nonsense. Inside, everything is minimal. Black leather chairs, white walls, right angles everywhere. You feel like blinking too often might ruin the aesthetic. And yet, it's oddly calming. After the sensory overload of Victorian trims and Gothic flourishes, this place feels like an exhale. You sit in a Barcelona chair and pretend you know what a Le Corbusier is. As twilight settles in, you walk one last stretch beneath these towering monuments to ambition. Their glass facades reflect the golden light, flickering like water. Up above, office lights blink on, one by one, thousands of tiny rectangles, each holding a story, a late report, a spilled coffee, a tired sigh. From a distance, it looks like starlight. From here, it's just another night in a vertical city. You stand on a street corner, surrounded on all sides by steel giants, and realize these aren't just buildings. They're statements, monuments to a country that decided the only direction worth going was up. You're still rubbing the back of your neck from all that upward gazing when the city shifts again. The lines soften. The shine dulls just a little. And suddenly, everything feels more grounded. Welcome to the world of the craftsman bungalow, America's architectural exhale. It doesn't try to scrape the sky or dazzle you with stained glass. It just wants you to take off your shoes, sit on the porch, and maybe plant some herbs. The bungalow before you is low-slung and welcoming. A broad front porch stretches out like it's waiting for a dog nap or a lemonade. The roof slopes gently, wide eaves overhanging like a protective hug. Exposed beams peek out under the gables, because why hide the good stuff? You climb the 3 stone steps and grip a chunky, tapered porch column. It's cool, textured, and built like it's ready for the next 100 years. Inside, the space feels small but not cramped. It's cozy in the way that makes you want to bake something, whether or not you actually know how. The walls are lined with warm, stained wood, built-in bookshelves flank a modest fireplace that smells faintly of past winters. The windows aren't giant, but they're placed to catch light just right, filtered through art glass in geometric patterns. You sit down, and the couch actually fits your legs. No frills, no drama, just honest, handmade calm. Mainstream historical fact: the craftsman movement grew out of the arts and crafts philosophy, which took root in the U.S. around 1905 and lasted through the 1930s. It was a reaction to industrialization, favoring handcrafted materials, natural finishes, and simplicity over mass-produced fluff. The style was popularized by pattern books and magazines, including The Craftsman, yes, the one edited by furniture designer Gustav Stickley, a man who looked like he could build a chair with one hand and judge your wallpaper with the other. You wander into the dining room, which isn't hidden or walled off. It flows naturally from the living space. There's a built-in sideboard, maybe even a fold-out ironing board tucked into a closet like an origami trick. Every inch is useful, every detail deliberate. And here's the quirky part. Some craftsman bungalows came with inglenooks, little recesses built around the fireplace, with benches on either side. Basically a cozy nook for books, naps, or long discussions about homemade jam. Historians still argue whether the craftsman movement was a true rejection of modernity or just another style caught in the wave of nostalgia. Was it anti-industry, or was it simply the middle-class version of rustic chic? Either way, it caught on and spread like warm butter across suburban America. Out back, there's a small yard, maybe a detached garage, and a sunroom filled with potted plants and mismatched chairs. You peek into the kitchen modest, tiled, probably with a breakfast nook built into a corner. It's not fancy, but it's full of light. And for once, the floorboards don't sigh under your weight like they're disappointed. Now you stroll through a whole neighborhood of craftsman homes. Everyone is a variation on the theme earth-toned exteriors. Stone foundations, big porches, overhanging eaves. Some have pergolas. Some have window boxes. A few have actual craftsmen working on repairs. Slowly, lovingly, with tools that look older than your grandpa. No two homes are identical, but they all speak the same language. Settle in. You pause at a mail slot engraved with a floral motif. The doorbell is ceramic and hand-painted. Even the house numbers are in that distinctive serif font that somehow feels friendlier than digits have any right to. You walk inside another bungalow, and the air smells like lemon oil and lived in peace. There's no chandelier, just a simple pendant, light, with amber glass. There are no double-height ceilings, just warmth, proportion, and that very specific feeling of being enough. People live differently here. These homes were often just 1 or 1.5 stories, encouraging a smaller footprint, more intentional use of space. You might find a Murphy bed tucked in the wall, or drawers built into the staircase, tiny acts of design genius hiding in plain sight. Then there's the front porch culture. Oh, the porches, wide, shaded, designed for conversation and observation. A place to sit with a book, wave at neighbors, sip something cold. In some towns, a porch swing was practically required by law, or at least by passive-aggressive neighbor judgment. You sit on one now, the chain creaking gently, and watch the sky change colors between the branches. But craftsman homes weren't just for the affluent. Thanks to plan books and catalog orders, families across the country could order a house like they were shopping for a sofa. Sears, Roebuck & Co. sold thousands of Kit Homes actual craftsman bungalows delivered by train, ready to assemble. You find one of those houses here. It's a little simpler, a little humbler, but every corner speaks of care. Someone picked that trim. Someone stained that wood by hand. You knock, and the door makes a soft, solid thump. None of that hollow core nonsense. Inside, you find more built-in desk nooks, linen cupboards, even tiny closets with secret drawers. You begin to suspect this house was designed by someone who hoarded storage hacks before it was cool. There's a calm here. Like the house knows it doesn't have to impress anyone. It just has to hold your life. As dusk sets in, porch lights flicker on across the block. Soft yellows, never harsh whites. You hear the clink of dishes, the muffled laughter from a screen door, and the wind whispering through the overgrown hydrangeas. These homes weren't built to dominate. They were built to hold to cradle people through every season. You sit on one last porch, barefoot now, and run your toes along the smooth grain of the planked floor. Above you, exposed, rafters stretch overhead like wooden ribs. You take a breath, long and slow. The house seems to exhale with you. No skyscrapers, no towers, no fuss. Tust shelter. Made well. Your feet are barely off that porch step when the pace of everything starts quickening again. You move from leafy neighborhoods with their sleepy craftsman charm into a city pulsing with style, jazz, and the shimmer of modernity. The skyline begins to sparkle differently now, no longer climbing like a ladder, but dancing. Welcome to the Art Deco era, where architecture doesn't whisper, it struts. The building in front of you practically winks. Sleek. Vertical lines stretch upward, with geometric confidence. There are sunbursts, zigzags, and stylized feathers carved into the stone, like the whole facade is doing the Charleston. You step through a brass-framed revolving door and into a lobby that feels like a movie set and a time capsule rolled into one. Mainstream historical fact: Art Deco architecture took off in the 1920s and 30s. A reflection of a new machine. Age, glamorous, confident, and technologically tuned. It flourished during the Roaring Twenties and into the early Depression years, showing up in train stations, movie palaces, skyscrapers, and department stores. Think Chrysler Building. Think Rockefeller Center. Think stylized everything. This lobby. It's a symphony in black marble, gold leaf, and terrazzo. The elevator doors are etched with lightning bolts. A pattern of chevrons glides across the floor, interrupted only by a receptionist who looks like she may have stepped out of a radio drama. You push the elevator button, and it lights up in a crisp Art Deco font that screams 1931. As you ride upward, you admire the metalwork. Everything here is sleek, symmetrical, and obsessed with motion, even when standing still. Step out, and you're in an office suite with horizontal bands of windows and glass block walls that blur sunlight into geometry. You touch the desk, which gleams like a chrome bumper, and wonder what it would feel like to type a letter while wearing a fedora. But Art Deco wasn't just for the rich and mirrored. It seeped into every layer of the city. You stroll past a corner diner wrapped in stainless steel, neon, and turquoise tile. A stylized stepped roof crowns a post office like a ziggurat designed by an architect with a flair for drama. Even bus stops got the deco treatment, streamlined shelters that made waiting in the rain feel vaguely cinematic. And here's your quirky nugget. Some deco buildings incorporated Egyptian motifs, scarabs, sphinxes, even papyrus designs, thanks to the 1922 discovery of King Tut's tomb. Suddenly, Art Deco became Egyptian revival's cooler cousin. You spot a frieze, now winged discs, and stylized lotuses perched above the door of an insurance office. You step closer and feel like you're entering both a cathedral and a jazz club. Historians still argue whether Art Deco was true modernism or just decorative rebellion. Was it embracing the machine age or camouflaging it in gloss? Either way, it struck a nerve. America had its first architectural style that wasn't a hand-me-down from Europe. It was homegrown, kinetic, and unashamedly flashy. You duck into a movie theater now, a deco masterpiece in red and gold. The marquee outside curves like a wave, lined with blinking bulbs. Inside, the ceiling soars, painted with stars and concentric rays. Murals flank the walls, heroic figures with square jaws and capes that flutter like advertisements. You take a seat in the velvet aisle, just in time for the organ to groan into life. Architecture here doesn't just shelter. It performs, outside again. The streets are humming with traffic. Heels tapping. Typewriters clacking in glassy buildings that sparkle in the afternoon light. You pass a hotel where the doorknobs are octagonal. The elevator cage is filigreed like a bracelet, and the hallway lights glow behind frosted panels etched with palm fronds. Even the fire escapes look stylish. Now you're at a deco apartment building. The entrance is inset like a jewel box, framed in aluminum, terrazzo, and obsidian-colored tile. You walk inside, greeted by a streamlined mailbox unit and a floor pattern that resembles a board game from the future. Upstairs, the units are compact but filled with detail, stepped moldings, built-in vanities, mirrored closets with beveled edges. Even the radiators have flair. You peer out the window and see the sun catching on 100 more buildings. Each one, a kind of sculpted optimism. It's the 1930s. The world is wobbling between prosperity and collapse. But the buildings still gleam. They were made to last and to dazzle while doing it. You head now to a deco train station vast, echoing, eternal. Arched ceilings, holding clocks, a mosaic map that stretches half a wall. You wander the concourse, dwarfed by ambition. These weren't just transportation hubs, they were shrines to movement, to speed, to progress. The floors gleam with the footsteps of decades. You pause to admire an art glass panel that seems to shimmer with motion, even though it hasn't moved since 1937. And then, you notice the shift. Something's changing. A new kind of building creeps into view, less glam, more glass. The deco curves begin to flatten. The gold accents fade, and the smooth chrome is replaced with steel and sharp right angles. You step outside and look one last time at a building with chevron trim glowing in the dusk. It doesn't shout anymore. It glows. Softly, with the elegance of an era that believed in style, even when the world trembled beneath its feet. You walk away, the last rays of sun bouncing off those stepped cornices and mirrored panels, and think we built this in the middle of jazz. Stock crashes, and bootleg gin, and, somehow, we made it beautiful. You move through the city like it's shedding its skin. The bold lines of Art Deco dissolve, replaced by something smoother, more efficient, like someone took all the architectural frills, set them on fire, and said, "All right, let's get serious." You're in post-war America now, and the new dream doesn't soar, it stretches. Welcome to the suburbs, where repetition reigns and the future has a carport. Before you, row upon row of identical houses stretches into the distance. Neatly mowed lawns, white fences, garages facing the street like they're the true front door. You've entered Levittown, the birthplace of American suburbia, and everything smells faintly of new paint and conformity. Mainstream historical fact: after World War II, the United States experienced an unprecedented housing boom. Returning soldiers and their families needed homes fast. Developers like William Levitt answered the call by mass-producing modest, single-family homes using assembly line techniques. Levittown, New York was the prototype 17. 0 homes built in under 4 years. It was affordable, accessible, and nearly identical. You walk through a house that's exactly 750 square feet. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a living room with a wide picture window, a kitchen with laminate countertops, cherry wallpaper, and a brand new refrigerator humming like a spaceship. It feels like a starter home. Because it is. Millions of American families stepped into adulthood through one of these cookie-cutter doors. Quirky fact: these houses were so standardized that the workers constructing them would rotate stations, one group laying foundations, another raising frames, a third installing bathrooms. Like building a house was assembling a giant sandwich. Some crews could finish a house in one day. Imagine going to work, pouring a driveway, and coming home to find your neighbor has a whole new home. With curtains, historians still argue whether the suburbs were utopian dreams or architectural anesthesia. Did they represent prosperity and freedom, or just a dulled version of both? Some say Levittown was the realization of Jeffersonian ideals: land, independence, space. Others say it was a vinyl-sided escape hatch from complexity. You step outside. Everything is tidy. Too tidy. The streets are curved intentionally, so cars won't speed. Mailboxes match. Trees are young but hopeful. It's all pleasant. Maybe a little too pleasant. You try to remember which house you just came from. But they all have the same siding, shutters, and window boxes. If not for that one pink tricycle on the lawn, you'd be lost already. Now you enter a different kind of suburban development. This one from the late 1950s. The houses are still modest, but there's a change. Big picture windows, split levels, carports that are practically bragging. Everything is built around the car now. Garages take up a third of the facade. There's no sidewalk. Driveways are the new front porches. Inside, the furniture is lower, sleek, upholstered in colors with names like Seafoam, Sunset Rose, and Atomic Tangerine. The television sits like an altar in the living room, framed by faux wood paneling and shag carpet. You sit down on the couch and disappear about 4 inches too far into the cushions. Comfort, apparently, was the point. You wander into a kitchen filled with the latest tech push-button stoves, electric clocks, and metal cabinets that sound like cymbals when you close them. It's pastel paradise. You spot a built-in blender that hasn't worked since Eisenhower, and a pull-down menu chalkboard that reads Tuna Surprise again. In the backyard, there's a modest patio, a rusting grill, and a swing set slowly giving in to entropy. It's quiet. The kind of quiet only suburbs know. No honking. No yelling. Just the faint buzz of a lawnmower, 4 streets over, and a sprinkler spinning in lazy half-circles. And then there's the garage. Oh yes. This is where mid-century dreams went to stretch. Attached garages became temples of hobby. Tool benches, mini fridges, lawn chairs, maybe a dartboard. The garage wasn't just for parking. It was for tinkering, retreating, escaping the in-laws when they came over just to see the kids. Now walk a few blocks over. Here comes the ranch-style home, long, low, and horizontal, like a house that gave up on stairs altogether. 1 story, often with sliding glass doors to a backyard that's probably filled with barbecue smoke and good intentions. Inside, there's a sunken living room called a conversation pit that's either deeply cool or wildly impractical, depending on how many ankles have been twisted. Quirky side fact: the sliding glass door became a symbol of post-war life. It literally opened the home to the backyard, and, metaphorically, to leisure. Because nothing says domestic bliss like grilling hot dogs while someone else waters a hibiscus. You sit at a kitchen table with a formica top and aluminum edges and realize something: these homes aren't flashy. But they're specific. They're built for the nuclear family, the two-car driveway, and the dog who always comes back muddy. They were made to house optimism. Sometimes naive optimism, but optimism nonetheless. Outside again. You pass a cul-de-sac, a design feature created to reduce through traffic and increase the likelihood of spontaneous bike parades. The mailbox is lean. The kids play hopscotch and chalk. And someone is definitely grilling something that smells better than it will taste. You pause in the street, surrounded by the gentle repetition of roofs and porches and flower beds. It's easy to joke about these places: vinyl siding, chain-link fences, the tyranny of beige. But they were also the backdrops of lives. First steps, birthday parties, burnt casseroles and prom photos. Architecture that wasn't trying to win awards, just to hold people quietly. You sit on a plastic patio chair in someone's side yard, sip an imaginary iced tea, and let the sprinklers hum their mechanical lullaby. The world feels paused here, caught between ambition and contentment. You realize not every revolution needs a tower. Sometimes it just needs a driveway and a neighbor who lends you their rake. You stretch your legs across a concrete driveway one last time before stepping into a different kind of dream, still suburban, still American, but suddenly lighter, sleeker, and suspiciously shaped like a spaceship. This is the land of mid-century modern, where the homes look like they were designed by someone who loved rectangles, worshipped glass, and maybe took design advice from the Jetsons. The house before you doesn't rise grandly or wrap itself in gingerbread. It hovers. It floats. Flat roof, wide eaves, an entire wall made of glass. It looks like it's waiting to be photographed with a tumbler of scotch and a jazz record softly spinning in the corner. You walk up a flagstone path that leads to a front door the color of a ripe avocado. Welcome home. 1961. Mainstream historical fact: mid-century modern architecture flourished from the late 1940s through the 1960s. It was a response to the rigidity of earlier styles and an embrace of new materials: steel, glass, plywood, and new ideals, like indoor-outdoor living and openness. Architect like Richard Neutra, Eero Saarinen, and Joseph Eichler helped bring this modernist utopia into the American mainstream. Inside, the house opens like a sigh. The floor plan is open. No more walled-off parlors or dark dining rooms. It's just space. Air. Light. You step onto terrazzo flooring and glance left: a floating fireplace, minimalist furniture, and a view straight through to the backyard, thanks to that wall of glass. You feel like you're standing in an ad for cigarettes, martinis, or both. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some of these homes had conversation pits, sunken areas in the living room with built-in seating where you could sit, sip, and, presumably, discuss existentialism or how to mix the perfect gimlet. You step into one now and promptly realize there's no graceful way to exit a conversation pit. The kitchen, open to the living area. The cabinetry, flat front, blonde wood, sometimes with plastic laminate accents, in punchy colors like coral or robin's egg blue. The fridge is built in and looks like it's trying not to be noticed. The whole thing hums, with a gentle coolness, like the home itself is above drama. Historians still argue whether mid-century modern was truly about simplicity, or just another aesthetic phase. Was it a rejection of clutter and ornamentation? Or just the new kind of ornamentation minimalism, with very expensive chairs? Either way, it was aspirational. You didn't just live in a mid-century modern house. You performed in it. You take a seat on a low-slung sofa designed with the human spine only vaguely in mind. A nearby coffee table is so sleek it's almost invisible. And the plant in the corner looks suspiciously curated. There's a sunburst clock on the wall, ticking like it's waiting for a Cold War news bulletin. Light pours in from clerestory windows, casting long shadows that look intentional. Out back, the yard blends with the interior thanks to sliding glass doors, concrete patios, and breezeways that blur the line between house and horizon. You imagine a barbecue here, cocktails in hand, lounge chairs facing the same direction like sun-worshipping suburbanites. There's a kidney-shaped pool nearby, because, of course there is, and a cantilevered awning that shades everything just enough to feel architectural. Next door is an Eichler home, one of thousands built in California, and a few scattered states by developer Joseph Eichler, who believed modernist design should be affordable for the middle class. His homes feature post and beam construction, radiant floor heating, and an open atrium in the center, a little sky inside the house. You walk into that atrium now. It's open to the sky, surrounded by glass walls on all sides. Rain could fall right in. Stars, too. Or just leaves, which someone probably regrets every October. But it's gorgeous. It's weird. It's a courtyard with a roofless roof. In the bedroom, everything is horizontal. The bed is low. The dresser's low. The windows are long, set high on the wall for privacy, but still allowing light to sneak in like it's playing a game. Even the closet doors slide. Nothing swings open. Nothing wants to interrupt the line. And then, the bathroom. Hello. Pastel, tiles. The sink floats. The tub is built in like a molded shell. There's a mirror so wide it's almost smug. And the entire space smells like hairspray. Optimism. And possibly avocado soap. You open the medicine cabinet and find it shallow. Precise. Unyielding like the decade itself, you step out again onto the patio and feel the breeze carry over the sloped roof. A neighbor 2 doors down is arranging their rock garden. Someone else is adjusting the angle of their butterfly chair. These houses weren't about status in the old-fashioned sense. They were about lifestyle. They said, "You read Dwell magazine before it existed." They said, "You probably make fondue." But ironically, and here's another curious bit, many mid-century modern homes used carports instead of garages. No doors, no barriers, just a roof and a hope that your neighbor won't borrow your hubcaps. You walk past one now, there's a Thunderbird underneath, gleaming like it belongs in a Bond film. Above it, the roof juts out in a clean line, so thin it looks like it might float away. As dusk descends, the neighborhood begins to glow. Not flicker, not twinkle. Glow. Interior lights reveal clean lines. Thoughtful silhouettes. Silhouettes of owners, framed by floor-to-ceiling glass, like living sculptures in suburban dioramas. No curtains. That was the point. These homes were meant to be seen. You walk down the sidewalk such as it is, and feel the pace slow. There's a quiet confidence to these homes. No showmanship. Just intention. No clutter. Just composition. A house that assumes you drink espresso and understand Bauhaus references even if you don't. You pause beneath an overhang. Just as the motion-activated porch light clicks on with mechanical politeness. The air smells like jasmine and cut grass. A record plays faintly through the glass. Something with horns. And a bit too much reverb. You sit down on a molded fiberglass bench and exhale. Mid-century modern didn't just give us open plans and sleek lines. It gave us space to breathe. To imagine. It built homes that invited the outside in, and occasionally let the inside out, whether you wanted it to or not. You blink away the last of the retro glamour, and feel the air shift again, cooler, heavier, and a bit moodier. Gone are the cantilevered roofs and atomic clocks. The house ahead looks like it was carved from a single block of cement, then scowled into place. Welcome to the world of brutalism, where subtlety is a crime, and every building looks like it's judging you. You approach a structure so monolithic it might be a bunker, a courthouse, or a villain's hideout, possibly all three. There's no trim, no porch swing, just raw, unpainted concrete and tiny, defiant windows. You place your hand against the rough surface and instantly understand the name brutalism. From the French, béton brut, meaning rough, concrete. It's not about violence, it's about honesty. At least, that's what the architects said. Mainstream historical fact brutalism flourished in the United States from the 1950s through the 1970s, particularly in public buildings, universities, and civic structures. It emphasized strong geometric forms, rough materials, and an unflinching refusal to pretty things up. You didn't build brutalist to be liked. You built it to last. Inside, the atmosphere is cavernous. Ceilings soar, but don't welcome. The walls are textured, board-formed concrete that still bears the imprint of the wooden planks used to mold them. There's a slight echo when you walk, like your footsteps are being judged in Latin. The windows, where they exist, are narrow slits, more like defenses than views. You pass a stairwell that twists upward like a concrete DNA strand. Railings are made of cold metal tubing. Lighting is recessed, minimal, and slightly institutional. You feel like you should lower your voice, even though there's no one else here. Just you and the acoustics of architectural existentialism. And now for something quirky. Some brutalist buildings had built-in rain channels that created dramatic water effects during storms. The idea, to let nature leave its mark. The result? A soundtrack that made every thunderstorm feel like you were trapped in a minimalist horror film. You peer up at one of those channels now, half expecting it to groan. Historians still argue whether brutalism was a noble rejection of consumerism or an accidental menace. Did it democratize architecture by focusing on function over form, or did it alienate people by replacing beauty with severity? Either way, it left a mark, a heavy, concrete mark, usually with very few right angles. You walk across a public plaza, flanked by brutalist giants, a library shaped like a gray beehive, a city hall that looks like it was dropped from space, and an academic building nicknamed the Fortress of Solitude by exhausted students who may or may not have ever seen sunlight from inside. Everything feels intentional, mathematical, and mildly post-apocalyptic. You slip into a lecture hall steep tiers. Slab seating. Ceiling, so low, it practically growls. The acoustics are perfect. The mood debatable. There's no soft lighting. No artwork. Just concrete. Seating. And the vague sense that a philosophy professor is about to ruin your evening with a discussion about mortality and municipal zoning codes. Yet, despite the gloom, there's a strange sort of elegance here. A kind of architectural honesty. No decorative façades. No false walls. What you see is what holds the place up. Brutalism doesn't hide the bones, it celebrates them. It says, "This building is working very hard, and it will not be wearing makeup." You move now to a brutalist church. Yes, they exist. Outside, it looks like a fallen spaceship. Inside a sanctuary carved from light and shadow, beams of sunlight pierce narrow vertical openings, slanting across bare stone like divine geometry. There are no pews, just benches set into the architecture itself. The space doesn't beg you to pray. It just assumes you will. Or won't. The building doesn't really care. You continue on to a university campus. A concrete jungle. Truly. Walkways like trenches. Lecture halls that double as psychological tests. And students huddled near the one coffee kiosk, debating whether they're inside or just somewhere between despair and finals. And yet, these buildings survive decades of use, abuse, and last-minute cramming. They are tanks disguised as learning centers. Now, for the residential side. You step into a brutalist apartment complex. Yes, some people live in these. The walls are thick. The staircases are oddly sculptural. And everything has weight. The living room opens onto a balcony that juts out like a drawbridge, offering a view of nothing in particular. Inside, it's quiet. The concrete absorbs noise like a sponge, with a superiority complex, curiously. Many of these homes were designed with thoughtful, passive heating and cooling. The concrete absorbs heat during the day and releases it at night. Window placement isn't random. It's strategic. You start to notice the logic hiding under the austerity and the cleanliness of line. Brutalism may be hard to love, but it's harder to ignore. As evening deepens, the buildings begin to glow, not brightly, but with a soft, indirect light that spills through narrow openings and spreads across the plaza like spilled ink. You find a bench surprise. It's concrete and sit beneath a wall that leans out at just enough of an angle to feel like it's challenging you to a staring contest. You look around and see the city stretching out glass towers, brick warehouses, Victorian townhomes. And here, in the middle of it all, a brutal block of silence. Not welcoming, not cruel, just present. You run your hand across the raw surface once more and feel the history baked into every line. It wasn't built to charm you. It was built to hold up. Through protest marches, budget cuts, rainstorms, and critics who never quite understood what it was trying to say. Maybe it didn't want to be understood. Maybe it just wanted to stand. You rise from the concrete bench and step away from brutalism's heavy silence, letting your eyes adjust to something weirder. Yes, it's still a building, but now the roof looks like it's wearing a party hat. The windows are playing peekaboo, and the columns are just slightly wrong. Congratulations, You've arrived in the land of postmodernism, where architecture finally snapped and decided to have a little fun. The house ahead looks like it came from a dream where geometry got bored of behaving. There's a classical column, but it's pink. There's a gable roof, but it ends in a spiral. There's a pediment. Sure, but it's purely decorative and might be upside down. You're not entirely sure whether this building is brilliant or mocking you. Mainstream historical fact. Postmodern architecture emerged in the 1970s as a reaction to the severity of modernism and the bleakness of brutalism. It welcomed back color, ornament, and historical references, often playfully distorted. Think of it as architecture's ironic mustache phase. Robert Venturi, Michael Graves, and Charles Moore led the charge with the mantra, "Less is a bore." You walk inside a building that looks normal from afar and utterly bonkers up close. The lobby features mismatched tile patterns, cartoonishly oversized door frames, and lighting fixtures shaped like abstract birds, or maybe pasta. The front desk is a cube on top of a sphere. And behind it, the receptionist is completely unbothered. The floor plan, confusing on purpose. Hallways that curve. Rooms that aren't quite rectangles. A staircase that seems to lead to a mural. You climb it anyway, and find yourself in a reading nook, surrounded by fake Roman columns, painted wood. Naturally, and a ceiling, painted like a Renaissance sky, complete with cherubs that look slightly dazed. Quirky detail. Alert some postmodern buildings had useless elements, false doors, windows that didn't open, columns with no structural function just to make a point about architectural symbolism. Function wasn't the only goal anymore. Meaning, especially ironic or referential meaning, was back on the table. You spot a doorknob halfway up a wall and nod. Yes, that tracks. Historians still argue whether postmodernism was clever rebellion or chaotic regression. Was it intellectual subversion or just aesthetic trolling? Either way, it gave buildings permission to laugh. And in the 1980s, after decades of concrete and steel severity, America was ready to laugh, preferably in mauve. You step into a house now, one designed with all the typical postmodern eccentricity. The living room has 3 different ceiling heights. The fireplace is not centered, but deliberately skewed. The dining room has a window shaped like a triangle, pointing downward, like it's trying to ask you a riddle. The kitchen, however, is shockingly functional, sleek appliances, color block cabinets, checkerboard floor. It's Memphis Group meets Martha Stewart. You open a drawer and find it lined with zigzag paper. Because even the cutlery deserves whimsy. Now you wander into the city again. You pass a government building with Greco-Roman columns topped with smiley face capitals, a bank shaped vaguely like a neoclassical temple, but in teal and magenta, you're in a world where buildings reference the past with air quotes and throw confetti at the future. The Portland Building, designed by Michael Graves, looms ahead. You approach its facade symmetrical but saturated with unexpected ornament. Square windows in grid formation, framed by bright colors. A decorative keystone that's more metaphor than structure. You step inside and half expect the floor to play music. From there, you walk through a plaza ringed by buildings that mix high seriousness with architectural mischief. A high-rise sports Corinthian columns on the 30th floor for no reason other than because. Another has arched windows under a flat roof. It's architectural jazz. And you, Lucky sleeper. Have front row tickets. Now, for a suburban spin, you visit a postmodern McMansion. Oh yes. We're going there. The driveway leads to a house that's part colonial, part Mediterranean, part Tudor, and entirely confused. It has a turret, a portico, a faux balcony, and 3 different window shapes. You stare at it and think this was designed by someone who said yes to everything. Inside, it's even better. Cathedral ceilings over the living room. An open-concept kitchen with faux marble columns supporting nothing. A dining room with a tray ceiling painted to resemble a Tuscan sunset. The bathroom has a Grecian arch. The guest bedroom is wallpapered in damask. You're not sure what country or century you're in. And here's your second quirky tidbit. Postmodern homes often featured ironic luxury. Whirlpool tubs placed directly under stained glass windows. 2-story foyers with chandeliers the size of optimism. Faux wood vinyl flooring paired with elaborate Corinthian pilasters. Because why not? You walk through one hallway and notice it has 3 separate chair rails, all at different heights. Symbolism. Sure. You step outside, just as the sun begins to cast long shadows. The odd angles, fake pediments, and pastel stucco all catch the light in surreal ways. It's beautiful in a way you can't quite explain, like a dream of architecture through a kaleidoscope. You sit on a patio paved with decorative concrete shaped like puzzle pieces and breathe in the late 80s evening air. Around you, lights come on in buildings that are part sculpture, par parodie, part comfort zone. They don't care if you take them seriously. In fact, they'd prefer you didn't. A rooftop bears a weather vane shaped like a saxophone. A chimney curls upward like a soft-serve cone. Someone's front gate is designed to look like a deconstructed piano. Postmodernism didn't offer answers. It offered commentary, and neon, and whimsy. It built houses that said, "We know this is ridiculous." That's the point. You close your eyes against the orange sky. Lean back against a column that's doing its best to imitate ancient Greece, and smile. Sometimes architecture doesn't have to make sense. Sometimes it just has to make a point. You wake up surrounded by gables, cornices, turrets, faux stone façade, triple garage, and more square footage than logic. You blink. Are you in a theme park? A castle? A Mediterranean villa? No. This is a McMansion. Welcome to late 20th and early 21st century suburbia, where the house is big, the rooms are bigger, and the architectural style is all of them at once. The driveway stretches like a landing strip. The front door is so tall, it could moonlight as a church entrance. There are arched windows, rectangular windows, circular ones, and somewhere near the back, a window shaped like a triangle for reasons known only to the architect and maybe their horoscope. Mainstream historical fact: the McMansion boom began in the 1980s and exploded through the 1990s and early 2000s. These oversized homes, often built quickly on speculative developments, symbolized prosperity, status, and a certain love for crown molding. They weren't usually designed by architects. Instead, developers relied on a grab bag of styles and mass-produced plans optimized for impact, not integrity. You walk into the foyer and immediately feel like you should have dressed more formally. A double-height ceiling opens into a grand staircase with a wrought iron banister curling dramatically toward a chandelier the size of a small SUV. The floor is polished tile, gleaming, echoing with your every footstep like you've walked into a cathedral for beige carpet. And there's your quirky fact: many McMansions feature statement rooms that no one uses, two-story great rooms that are impossible to heat, formal dining rooms reserved solely for Thanksgiving, and sometimes even bonus rooms over the garage that serve no function except to confuse future owners. You peek into the living room, though it might be the family room or the hearth room. It's hard to tell. There's a gas fireplace with a mantel flanked by built-in shelves, holding exactly 2 books and 17 candle holders. Above the fireplace, a recessed niche where a large television or an unnecessarily large painting of Tuscany should go. You sit on the sectional, which could seat 8 comfortably or 12 uncomfortably, and stare across the room to the kitchen island, 2 zip codes away. You head into that kitchen open concept, naturally, and marvel at the acres of granite. The island has an island. There are double ovens, 2 fridges, and a walk-in pantry that could qualify as its own mailing address. Recessed lighting gleams off stainless steel appliances that may or may not have ever been used. You open a cabinet and discover it goes back further than expected. Possibly another dimension. Historians still argue whether McMansions were the architectural culmination of the American dream or just its loudest phase. Were they status symbols for a rising middle class, or the built equivalent of shouting, "Look how successful I am," into the void? Either way, they marked a shift from modest functionality to theatrical abundance. Upstairs, things get even stranger. The primary suite, we no longer say master, thank you, sprawls across the back of the house like a suburban penthouse. The bedroom has a tray ceiling, a sitting area with a fireplace, and an ensuite bathroom larger than some apartments. There's a whirlpool tub so big you worry about falling in sideways. There's a shower with 6 jets and no discernible exit strategy. You open the walk-in closet and are met with the distant echo of someone else's yoga pants. The kids' rooms, also large, probably with custom paint princess themes, Yongle murals, or vintage sports motifs, and closets filled with the kind of seasonal decorations that only make sense in a 3-car garage household. And speaking of the garage, you step out into a cavernous chamber where SUVs live in harmony beside racks of mystery tools. Overhead storage holds camping gear that hasn't camped in 5 years. A secondary fridge hums in the corner. Its only contents: soda, barbecue sauce, and guilt. Outside, the backyard is generous but vaguely designed. A flagstone patio leads to a lawn that stretches toward a retaining wall, disguised as landscaping. There might be a koi pond, or a waterfall feature, or one of those tiny gazebos that looks lovely in catalogs and haunted in real life. There's definitely a fire pit, possibly gas-fed. Always a conversation starter. Never quite used enough. And here's another quirky twist. Some McMansions are built with front facadism, meaning all the drama is on the front. Walk around the side, and the rest of the house becomes startlingly flat and utilitarian. It's like a movie set where the illusion stops abruptly at the edge of the frame. As you stroll through this neighborhood, you begin to see the pattern. Big house, big driveway, small architectural coherence. A turret here, a Palladian window there, maybe even a Corinthian column holding up a vinyl porch. It's Frankenstein architecture, stitched together from catalog inspiration and tax brackets. And yet, families grew up here. First steps were taken on these hardwood floors. Dogs left muddy paw prints on these expensive rugs. Homework was done at these granite islands. Graduation photos taken under these arched entryways. For all their awkwardness, McMansions housed real lives. You stop at a cul-de-sac and watch the sunset glint off faux stone siding and composite shingles. It's peaceful. A man waters his flower beds. A kid rides a scooter in lazy loops. Someone turns on the backyard string lights that make even the weirdest turret feel cozy. Love them or loathe them. McMansions reflect something deeply human, our desire to stretch out, to show off, to make space for everything and everyone. Even if the result is a little chaotic. They're the denim jackets of architecture, oversized, a little confused. But undeniably part of the American story. You sit on a porch swing, stare up at three mismatched gables, and smile. You still don't know what that round window is for, and maybe that's okay. You shake off the stucco confusion and step into a very different world, one where small is sacred. Square footage is optional, and your coffee table might double as a bed frame. Welcome to the age of tiny houses and sustainable architecture, where downsizing is the new status symbol and compost toilets are discussed over brunch. The structure before you could fit inside a McMansion garage, and probably has. It's 300 square feet of intentional living space, a box on wheels, clad in cedar siding and optimism. There's a miniature porch, a single solar panel angled heroically toward the sun, and a vertical herb garden clinging to the wall like a decorative manifesto. You duck your head to enter not because the door is low, but because the entire space makes you feel taller than you are. Inside, everything has been designed with the efficiency of a Swiss Army knife. The sofa folds into a bed. The bed folds into a wall. The wall contains a desk. The desk contains a composting toilet. You back away gently. Mainstream historical fact. The modern tiny house movement gained traction in the early 2000s, partially in response to rising housing costs, environmental concerns, and a general cultural backlash against waste and excess. It was both a social experiment and a design revolution. Books were written. Documentaries were made. Pinterest boards flourished. You sit at the two-person dining nook, one of only 3 designated zones in the house, and admire the reclaimed wood ceiling. There's no wasted space here. No spare room for clutter. Every item has a purpose. And if it doesn't, it becomes a shelf. You open a drawer and find a combination cutting board dish rack laptop stand. Clever. Possibly cursed. But clever. Quirky fact time. Some tiny homes include ceiling storage, accessible only by pulley or ladder. You spot one now, tiny wooden bins labeled winter clothes, hiking gear, and mystery cables. A loft bed perches above like a bird's nest, accessible by a ladder that doubles as towel storage. Climb up, and you're immediately aware of every snack you've ever eaten, because space here is not just vertical. It's personal. Historians still argue whether the tiny house trend is a noble return to simplicity or just aesthetic poverty with better lighting. Is it liberation from consumerism, or is it minimalist cosplay? Either way, people committed. Builders, designers, van lifers. Folks walked away from mortgages, leases, and closets, full of nothing just to see if they could live with less and be happier for it. You peek into the kitchen, 2 burners, 1 sink, a fridge that purrs like a content cat and fits only the essentials, mostly vegetables and ambition. The cabinets are open shelves. Because who needs doors when you only own 3 mugs? There's a mini oven, a spice rack the size of a paperback, and a single cast iron skillet that's clearly seen some things. Next, you step outside into a planned community of tiny homes, each one different, some on wheels, others on stilts, a few shaped like geodesic domes. You pass a cluster of solar panels arranged like sunflowers, an outdoor communal kitchen with compost bins labeled green, brown, and absolutely not, and a fire pit surrounded by benches made from upcycled pallets. A group nearby discusses gray water systems while eating lentils. You listen, politely. Now you wander into a more permanent example of sustainable architecture, the Earthship. Yes, that's really what it's called. The walls are made of tires packed with earth. The roof collects rainwater. The windows face south for passive solar gain. You step inside, and the temperature is weirdly perfect. Cool in summer, warm in winter, all without central heating. The floor is smooth adobe. The bathroom has plants growing in it. And the shower makes you feel like you've entered a tropical greenhouse on purpose. You sit in the living room, if you can call it that, and notice the furniture is mostly built into the structure. The coffee table is stone. The couch is just a wide ledge with cushions. A lizard suns itself on a shelf, entirely unbothered. This isn't a home that entertains guests. It's a home that whispers. Have you considered growing kale indoors? And here comes the architectural twist. Some of these homes produce more energy than they consume. Net zero design, passive house standards, even 3D-printed homes made from recycled concrete and local soil. You visit one now. It was printed in under 24 hours. Cost less than a used Toyota, and looks like a clay spaceship. You sit inside, the curves and contours feeling more like sculpture than structure, and think, well, this is weird, but kind of wonderful. You step back out into a world that's experimenting. Cob houses, straw bale construction, shipping container homes that look like someone reimagined Tetris as real estate. Each one built around a philosophy: less waste, more intention, smaller footprints, lighter touch. You visit a couple living in a van. They show you their retractable bed, their induction cooktop, their drawer full of neatly coiled USB cords. Everything is solar-powered, water-conscious, and held together with bungee cords and tenacity. You marvel at how much life fits in 40 square feet, and how much of it they seem to actually use as the day winds down. You sit outside one of the tiny homes, a cup of herbal tea in hand, watching string lights twinkle overhead, crickets chirp. Someone plays a quiet song on a ukulele made from reclaimed fence boards. There's peace here. Not flashy, not loud, just calm. And that's the thing about these homes, they don't command attention. They invite reflection. They're shelters that ask questions. What do you need? What can you let go of? How much is enough? You finish your tea. Rinse your cup in a rain barrel-fed sink. And look up at the stars. Fewer possessions, fewer walls. But somehow, the sky feels closer. You leave behind the garden beds and solar panels, the tiny porches and off-grid dreams, and step into the future, or at least, the version that's currently available in glass, steel, and polished concrete. The house before you doesn't smile or wave, it just gleams. Tall, angular, and unapologetically sleek. It's the architectural embodiment of a Bluetooth signal, clean, quiet, and always connected. Welcome to contemporary American architecture. This is not your grandma's house. This isn't even your weird aunt's energy-efficient hobbit hole. This is a box with ambition. You step up to a massive pivoting front door made from reclaimed barnwood, because nothing says modern like fusing tech with a sobbing piece of history, and push your way into an open-plan space. So airy, you wonder if it has its own oxygen supply. Mainstream historical fact. Since the early 2000s, contemporary American architecture has leaned heavily into minimalism, sustainability, and transparency. Literally. Glass walls, flat roofs, open layouts. Designers focus on flow, light, and blurred boundaries between indoor and outdoor living. It's not about having more. It's about showing less but better. The interior stretches out like a design magazine's fever dream. Concrete floors polished to a mirror finish. Exposed steel beams overhead. Arranged just so, like a Calvin Klein version of scaffolding. The walls are white. Not eggshell. Not ivory. Not morning fog. Just white. As if the color was scared to distract you from the sunlight pouring in through a wall of retractable windows. You cross the room to a kitchen that looks like it's never been used, and possibly isn't meant to be. Hidden cabinet pulls. An island that looks more like an art installation than a place to butter toast. A faucet that could pilot a spacecraft. The fridge has 2 doors and 0 handles. You open it by gently pressing a glowing dot. Inside, sparkling water and quiet judgment. Here's your quirky fact. Many high-end contemporary homes include entire invisible rooms. Secret doors built into bookshelves. Pantries disguised as blank walls. Closets hidden behind slabs of oak. In one you pass. The bathroom is tucked behind a full-length mirror that slides aside with the hush of a ninja. Historians still argue whether contemporary architecture is a response to digital life or a symptom of it. Is it calming in its simplicity? Or sterile in its detachment? Is it hiding warmth under all that glass and steel? Or just showcasing the new idea of luxury silence? Light. And $900 light switches. You head upstairs on a floating staircase, thin treads of wood cantilevered from a smooth concrete wall. No risers. No railing. Just you. Your balance. And a sense of architectural suspense. Upstairs. The hallway is barely a hallway. It's more like a pause between one gallery space and the next. The bedroom, called the primary suite, if you're feeling HGTV, is a minimal marvel. King bed floating on an invisible frame. No headboard. Just a single piece of artwork, a black rectangle on a white wall. You're not sure if it's art or a panel that controls the blinds. You touch it. It does nothing. Probably both. The ensuite bathroom has a walk-in shower the size of a racquetball court and a freestanding tub that looks like it was designed by aliens who only bathe in moonlight. The mirror defogs itself. The floors heat themselves. The toilet well. It does more than you expected. You step back carefully. Outside, there's a pool. Not a fun, kidney-shaped, cannonball-type pool. This one is long, narrow, reflective, black-bottomed, like a liquid tablet laid into the patio. The lounge chairs are angular. The fire pit looks like a sculpture of a fire pit. You sit beside it and try not to smudge the designer concrete. And now for the architectural subplot. The smart home systems, with a few whispered words. The lights adjust. Music plays from hidden speakers. And the window shades lower themselves, like they're embarrassed. Some homes even have environmental sensors that suggest when to water plants, open windows, or just take a deep breath and drink more cucumber water. You visit a home built into a hillside, now contemporary in every way, but rooted in the land. It's passive solar. It harvests rainwater. Its walls are insulated with recycled denim. There's a living roof with actual bees. The owner greets you from a sunken courtyard, wearing a poncho and sipping kombucha from a glass shaped like a prism. The air smells like rosemary and smugness. But the view's unbeatable. Then there are the urban additions, townhomes made from shipping containers. Loft apartments with exposed brick, polished steel, and staircases that make OSHA nervous. Homes where the garage has more design intention than most people's kitchens. And don't forget the accessory dwelling units, ADUs tiny. Modern structures squeezed into backyards for guests. Rentals. Or that one adult child who swore they were just staying for a week. You enter an ADU now, high ceilings. Pour concrete floor. 2 chairs that look like they're punishing you for bad posture. The bed folds into the wall. The kitchen has an induction cooktop that glows like a mood ring. There's a single plant in the corner. It's thriving, possibly judging. You walk through a city neighborhood of these glass and wood cubes. Some perched on hills. Others embedded in tight lots. Solar panels gleam. Electric vehicles charge silently. Mailboxes are sleek. Security cameras are discreet. And house numbers are etched into weathered steel plates like tiny tombstones for mail. As the evening cools, the glow from within these homes softens. It's not cozy in the traditional sense, but it is serene. You pass one house where an entire glass wall folds open like origami, revealing a living room where someone is meditating on a cushion that costs more than your monthly rent. You pose. It's strange. After centuries of peaks and pediments, of porches and towers, American homes have arrived at something so quiet it almost disappears. No turrets, no gingerbread trim, just calm, space, light. You reach out and run your fingers along the smooth siding, maybe reclaimed wood, maybe engineered composite, maybe just very persuasive plastic, and realize you've walked through hundreds of years of dreams, stacked stone by stone. This one's different. Not better. Not worse. Just newer. Quieter. Maybe waiting for whatever comes next. The last house fades behind you, its silhouette disappearing into the dark like a polite ghost. And suddenly, you're no longer walking on suburban streets or floating staircases. You're surrounded by glass towers tall, reflective, and eerily still, rising like giants in pressed suits. Welcome to the skyline of now. Welcome to the boxy, shimmering present, and maybe the strange, data-driven future of American architecture. You crane your neck and stare up at a skyscraper made entirely of glass and steel. The facade is seamless, mirrored, almost invisible against the dusk. It reflects the buildings around it, the clouds, even you tiny and flickering in its surface. This is the contemporary urban temple, sleek, sustainable, and mostly allergic to architectural flourishes. Mainstream historical fact: the last 2 decades have seen the rise of high-performance buildings architecture defined by energy efficiency, minimalism, and hyperfunctionality. The green building movement, LEED certification, and smart design systems are now baked into the blueprint. It's not just about style anymore, it's about data, metrics, and carbon footprints. You step into the lobby of one such tower. No front desk, just a glass kiosk, where a tablet asks you if you're expected. The floor is polished concrete. The ceiling has embedded LEDs, subtle and geometric. On the walls, there's living moss art, because nothing says cutting edge like photosynthesis. You take a breath. It smells like filtered air and eucalyptus. Like you're inside a very expensive air freshener. Up the elevator, you go fast. Silent. Touchless. Floors fly by with little more than a polite ding. When the doors open, you're inside a penthouse that could double as a spaceship. There's barely a line or edge to be seen. Walls slide instead of swinging. The lights adjust to your heartbeat, probably. A voice greets you from nowhere. Welcome. You are home. The living room is wall-to-wall windows. No curtains, just reactive glass that tints itself depending on the sunlight. The furniture is sculptural, minimalist, and slightly intimidating. The coffee table is either an abstract art piece or a charging station, possibly both. And here's your quirky detail. Many luxury towers now feature entire wellness floors dedicated to spas, cryotherapy chambers, meditation pods, and something called quantum biofeedback. You don't know what that is, but it probably involves soft music and an NDA. One floor even has a room designed for napping, and only napping. Historians still argue whether these sleek buildings represent the peak of modern architecture or just a really fancy spreadsheet in physical form. Are they masterpieces of efficiency or monuments to detachment as buildings get smarter, more automated, more optimized? You start to wonder, where does the human part go? You walk the sky bridge to another tower, this one built entirely from cross-laminated timber. A nod to the sustainable materials movement. It smells like cedar and ambition. The beams are exposed, but not rustic. No, this is not your cozy cabin. This is engineered wood, pretending it's still part of a tree. The staircase spirals like a DNA strand. The handrail is warm to the touch. As if the building wants to be more than efficient, it wants to be liked. Outside again, you pass rows of modular prefab homes, delivered by crane and stacked like Lego pieces into functional communities. They're cheap, efficient, and shockingly good-looking. In a modern IKEA meets Japan kind of way. Solar panels shimmer. Roofs double as gardens. Everything connects to an app. You enter one of these units. Inside, it's small but curated. Walls fold. Beds hide. There's a bike hanging on the wall next to a plant that may be smarter than you. The window opens with a soft pneumatic sigh. and you hear a drone buzz overhead, delivering groceries, or possibly a single artisanal croissant. Then you're off again through neighborhoods transformed by ADUs and 3D-printed concrete pods, past schools made of recycled shipping containers, libraries built like treehouses, gas stations turned into vertical farms, cities adapting in real time, architects bending materials like they're solving riddles. And yes, some buildings are getting weirder. You spot one shaped like a twisted helix. Its curves informed entirely by wind flow and AI-generated simulations. Another looks like an accordion mid-squeeze. A third leans dramatically to one side, as if it's waving at you. You wave back. Just in case, the architecture of tomorrow is coded algorithmic, responsive. Some buildings now literally breathe ventilation systems that open and close like lungs. Others change shape with the sun. One office tower has walls that ripple when employees walk by, like it's nodding in acknowledgement. But even with all the technology, there's still something deeply human about it all. You walk past a high-rise co-op built for seniors. Lots of light. No stairs. Wide doors. Quiet floors. Someone waves from a balcony, watering a tomato plant in a 30th floor garden box. You smile, and here's the unexpected twist in the shadow of all these towers. You find tiny spaces tucked between buildings. Pocket parks. Pop-up art galleries. Micro-homes repurposed from alleys and rooftops. Even cities have started remembering that people don't just work and commute, they live. They linger. They pause. You sit now at the base of a tower, one of those shimmering monoliths that looks like it could disappear into the sky if you blink too slowly. Around you, light dances on the pavement from dozens of windows. You hear laughter from somewhere above. The hum of conversation carried through vents and terraces. You tilt your head and watch. For all the glass, all the code, all the automation, it's still about this shelter. From storms, from noise, from loneliness, every brick, beam, and pixel is still trying to do the oldest job in the world, give you a place to rest. And maybe, just maybe, a view. And now, finally, your feet are still. You've wandered through thousands of years in a single breath, trudged through wigwams under the stars, tapped your fingers along craftsman woodwork, tilted your head skyward beneath glass towers, and ducked under the sloped eaves of every decade's best intentions. The journey ends not with fanfare, but with stillness. You're lying on your back now, somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. The walls around you are soft with memory, some brick, some beams, some pure imagination. Maybe you hear a floor creak in the night. Maybe there's the gentle hum of an old fridge in a galley kitchen. Maybe it's the whisper of wind brushing past modern siding, or the distant groan of a fire escape cooling in the dark. Whatever it is, it's familiar. The shapes may change. Columns may rise. Roofs may flatten. Homes may shrink or gleam or flirt with irony, but at the center of it all, architecture is just shelter, a way to wrap the world around you in something solid, something that holds. Tonight, maybe you dream of gables, of towers made from optimism and wood, of sleeping under beams that have seen centuries pass overhead. Or maybe you just drift quietly into a night held gently by walls, any walls, knowing that someone, somewhere, built them with care. So close your eyes, Let the last echoes of footsteps fade. Let every creaky floorboard lull you. Every weathered facade blur softly into sleep. You're home now, in the long story of shelter, and the house, whatever shape it takes, is holding you up. Sweet dreams.